Our next guest was one of the original investors and is still a large shareholder in Facebook. But since meeting Mark Zuckerberg over 10 years ago, he's now gone as far as describing the company as an existential threat to democracy in his new book, Zucked. We want to know why. Here to tell us exactly what he thinks, please put your hands together for Sheelah Kolhatkar of The New Yorker and the co-founder of Evolution Partners, Roger McNamee.
Very exciting to be here with you, Roger. Thank you.
This is completely awesome. Thank you all for coming out.
So I'm going to just kick it off by reading a choice line from your fascinating book, Zucked, which I read recently. You write, "A time will come when people recognize that the value they got from Facebook and other similar companies masked an unmitigated disaster for our democracy, for public health, for personal privacy, and for the economy." So you see a few problems with Facebook.
Well, so here's the thing. I really like Mark Zuckerberg. I really like Sheryl Sandberg. I like all the people at Facebook. I believe the culture of Silicon Valley drove Facebook, drove Google, and others to a business model that is incredibly destructive. And in a world where there are no rules on business, smart people are going to take whatever opportunities they can get. And it's amazing to me how brilliant these folks were, how large they got to be before the issues became really apparent. But now we're forced to deal with them. And we're forced to deal with them in democracy. We're forced to deal with them in our ability to make choices without fear, in our public health and the public health of our children. And most for you guys, really importantly, it's undermining innovation and entrepreneurship in a really profound way.
So if you could change one thing about Facebook and its business model, what would you change?
So I believe the core issue for Facebook and for Google is that they believe that the right model is to convert all human experience into data. Professor Shoshana Zuboff at Harvard has written a brilliant book called The Age of Surveillance Capitalism on this exact issue. And the notion is that Facebook and Google, by converting your entire life into data, and it's not because of the data you put in, it's because of data they acquire through surveillance, data they acquire by paying money, that they can essentially eliminate the inefficiency in the economy and all the uncertainty that makes your life stressful. Now, my problem with that is that I believe uncertainty is what allows us to make choices. It's where our free will comes from. And my basic point is, you may think the model's fine, and I'm cool with that. I just want to have a discussion because this is all going on outside our awareness. And it's in its final stages. Pretty soon we're going to be at a point where it's too late to go back. And before we get there, I just think we should have a conversation about, should all consumers be viewed as a source of fuel, or should we in fact each be entitled to self-determination and each have an opportunity to make our own choices? And I think if we have that conversation, I'm cool with whatever answer we come up with. But my notion to you is, I ask you, treat this as a thought experiment. Ask yourself, what if McNamee is right? What if his prescriptions happen? Am I going to be better off or worse off? And I'd love to know what answer you come up with when you're done.
So do you think that business people, executives, founders of companies have a responsibility for what people do with their products?
Oh, definitely. In fact, I think one of the real tragedies in business today is the fact that we run every company in America as though the only people who matter are shareholders, and that the only way to run a business is purely off of metrics. And I look at this and I go, hang on. Whatever happened to employees? Whatever happened to the communities where employees live? Whatever happened to customers and suppliers? Whatever happened to, to other values, right? Whatever, you can't really have any sense of ethics in a world totally dominated by metrics. By definition, ethics is the willingness to subordinate a metric to some higher value principle. And we don't have that today. And the key thing is, Silicon Valley didn't create this problem. Remember, in 2008, the banking industry destroyed the economy and there were no consequences. Wells Fargo basically defrauded millions of account holders, and there were no consequences. ExxonMobil ran its own foreign policy in Russia in contravention of sanctions, and we promoted the CEO to be Secretary of State. And I'm going, hang on, Silicon Valley didn't invent this problem, but I think we have a special responsibility because we used to have a very different value system. We used to put the consumer at the heart of our business. We used to be about empowering our customers. And somewhere along the way, we lost that focus. And I want to get back, because I think the opportunity, if we reverse the polarity of the business model, the opportunity will be wildly bigger than what we have today, because we know all of these apps, all these use cases are valuable, but there are literally thousands of other use cases you can't do because they don't fit into surveillance capitalism that you could do if we treated consumers as our customer again.
Imagine for a moment that you know Mark Zuckerberg very well. You've known him for a long time. So imagine you are running Facebook. You have pressure to deliver shareholder returns every quarter. You have people watching the stock price. What would you do to make Facebook less threatening?
So here's the thing. I would remind Mark that he has a golden vote. He has 2 classes of stock. He doesn't have to listen to any other shareholders, and the reality is, in practice, he does not listen to other shareholders. This is a deal he can do all by himself. And if I were sitting with Mark today, let's say Mark was here where Sheelah is, I'd say, Mark, you are one good night's sleep away from the epiphany that saves us all. I would remind him that he can be the hero in his own story, that he can do more good by changing the business model of Facebook than he can with 1,000 Chan Zuckerberg initiatives. And that the reality of this thing is he's already exceeded his wildest dreams. I mean, he can do the right thing. He can, again, be the hero in his own story. And I think Mark would like to do that. I just think he's surrounded at the moment by a culture and by people who don't give him that message. I mean, I think he's a very idealistic person. At least he always was when I knew him well.
Well, so I was going to ask you, why doesn't he do that? I mean, right now he's sort of vilified in the press, and that may not be something he cares about, but he could very easily set an example and people would suddenly change their views. Why doesn't he?
I think here's the thing. When I went to Mark and Cheryl in October of 2016, 9 days before the election, to tell them that I thought there was something about the business model and the algorithms that was allowing bad people to harm innocent people and encouraging them to get right on it and do something about it. I'm almost certain that Mark looked at me and goes, Roger, if you're so smart, where are your 2 billion monthly users? Where are your billions of dollars, right? I mean, they had been proving critics wrong for so long that I think the reflexive view was critics are always wrong. And so it didn't shock me that the initial reaction wasn't positive, but I spent 3 months privately pleading with Facebook to do what Johnson & Johnson did in 1982 when a guy put poison in bottles of Tylenol in Chicago. It killed a bunch of people. The CEO of Tylenol didn't wait for somebody to tell him. He went and withdrew every bottle of Tylenol from every retail shelf in North America and didn't put it back till he invented tamper-proof packaging. This is what Boeing should have done with the 737 MAX. And I begged, Dan Rosen and by extension Mark and Cheryl to do that with Facebook. And instead their reaction was, no, Roger, we're good. The law, Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act says we're not responsible for what third parties do because we're a platform, not a media company. And I'm going, guys, this is a trust business. If you lose people's trust, the business is going to implode and there's nothing you can do to stop it. You can't get it back. And I mean, I was coming to them as a friend, and I would still be a friend if they gave me a chance because I harbor no ill will. I like them, and they are in the best position by a mile to fix this problem. And so, I just thought it's hard to impose a change from the outside. In fact, Sheelah, the big danger we've got is that Facebook and Google have left governments with no choice but to do what Sri Lanka did. The next time something goes bad, they have to shut the platforms down because the platforms, everything they're doing is cosmetic. I mean, you can see this in the EU elections in Germany right now. You're going to see it in 2020 here, that these platforms are still easy to manipulate, both by foreign actors and by people who are inside the country acting inauthentically. And, you know, it's too bad. But can you imagine what happens if the thing that happened in New Zealand happened, say, in Belgium or France? If, you know, one country in the EU shuts down Facebook and Google, they're all going to have to do it. And it's totally unnecessary. I mean, it would be necessary, but it shouldn't have to be necessary. And it just makes me feel terrible because we love these products, but the reality is there are plenty of alternatives. I mean, DuckDuckGo would see its business go from here to here in about 10 seconds, right? And, you know, we're not going to have to give up the functionality we like. We might just get it from a different vendor. I mean, how long would it take you guys in this room to reinvent Facebook with a good business model if they weren't there? Would it take you, what, 2 days, 4 days, a week? I mean, it's just not that hard. You wouldn't do the whole thing, but you do the core elements. And 10 of you would each do one core element, and then later on you'd all get together and you'd be rich.
So you touch on another question I wanted to ask you. You mentioned this earlier. How does this model and the kind of dominating, all-encompassing success of this model in Silicon Valley harm innovation, harm the ability of other people to create
How
new
many
things?
of you guys have AI built into your business model? Wow, okay, normally when I talk to a tech group, it's most people. So my hypothesis is that Google, Facebook, Microsoft, and Amazon have about 70% of all the AI professionals in North America. And to a first approximation, they're all working on behavioral manipulation. And I sit there and go, wait a minute, there are literally a million things you could do with AI that'd be really compelling, right? You could track mouse movement and tell people if they have a neurological disorder like Parkinson's, right? That would be an amazing application. In medical alone, there are thousands of different applications. But right now, the cost of hiring AI professionals is completely distorted by the fact that Google and Facebook and Amazon and Microsoft go and hire whole departments from universities all around North America. And you can't bring people in from the outside because we have all these immigration restrictions now. And so I look at this and I go, that's a classic hidden example of the problem. And you know, you look at this and you go, think about their patents, right? You can create something really amazing, right? They can tromp on your patent, and because of their cross licenses with each other, they can just bury you in court. I mean, that's happened to me. And it's like, all of this stuff, they have concentric layers of moats of copyrights, patents, network effects, right? They've got all their employees, they've got all of their government lobbying. I mean, it's hard to be an entrepreneur. So it pushes everybody into things like blockchain and transportation and services your parents used to do for you, which may be good businesses, but they're not as good as reinventing the internet in a distributed identity model, which is the thing I want to see. I want to be able to have my own terms of service. I want to have my identity be under my control rather than randomly distributed by companies that are just simply trying to milk me for every penny I have.
You went from being an investor and an advisor to some of these companies to being an activist, and a very outspoken activist with some strong opinions. What has the hardest part been for you?
Yeah, so here's the thing I'll tell you. Being an activist sucks. I spent 35 years being a true believer in technology. I mean, from 1982, when I started, the big thing was the space shuttle. I mean, we were in front of the personal computer industry. I'm 1 year younger than Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, and knew those guys from, you know, when we were all, you know, under 30. I mean, Silicon Valley is my life. It never ever occurred to me that Silicon Valley was going to cause harm, much less that it was going to be like structural harm to society and democracy and privacy. And when I saw that, I'm in this situation where I was retired. I could have sat back and just said, it's somebody else's problem. But for whatever reason, I realized I was there. I was part of it. My firm profited enormously from it. I profited personally. And so I realized I have to try to make people aware of the problem. I'm not going to tell them what to think, but I'm going to tell them what I know. And I'm going to keep digging and keep learning. And the book was just an attempt to put what I knew at that time in one place so we could elevate the conversation. Shoshana Zuboff's book elevates it to another whole level. You know, so now I go to Washington and I go and deal with government and I go and deal with, you know, the press and all that. But it's really depressing because while there's been maybe a tenfold increase in awareness of the problem, our understanding of what the problem actually is has grown much more. So in many ways, we've lost ground. And I really, you know, what I ask each and every one of you is to go home and think about what kind of a world you want to live in and what kind of a role do you want to play in it. Because you don't have to agree with me. In fact, I'm sure most of you don't. And that's fine. But let's all be deliberate about what we do. Let's not just sleepwalk into a world where technology authoritarianism governs our choices, where we give the customers perfect information, but we're stuck with only the information that Google and Facebook choose to give us. That just doesn't strike me as fair. And, you know, I want to believe that we're better than that. And I'd like to go back to that world or go forward to that world. And I'd like you guys to all be part of it if you want. And that'd be cool.
How's your social life in Silicon Valley? Have the dinner party invitations started to dry up?
It's totally changed everything.
Yeah.
No, so what I did was I lost one whole community and I gained a different one. And, you know, you guys don't know this, but I'm also a musician. And so the music world has always been a big part of my social existence, and that part hasn't changed. But I've gotten to know a whole new set of people from this, and that's been positive. But you know what the really coolest thing is? You guys, if you'd seen me 10 years ago, I had 7 mobile devices on my belt. I looked like Batman, right? It was nuts. And partly it was branding, but I really was testing all these products. And my whole life was mediated by technology. And the coolest thing, I've been on the road 7 days a week for 15 weeks since the book came out. I've made more eye contact and had more genuine personal conversations with people in the last 15 weeks than the prior 15 years put together. And that's the silver lining on what is otherwise, you know, it's not like, you know, I go into places and people welcome me. People, you know, I get the range of, you know, people either being hostile or looking at me like dogs watching television or going, oh my God, my kid is ready to commit suicide, can you help me? Right? It's like, but that's the world we live in today, right? And you know, we got to deal with that.
So we're all aware of the problem. Certainly in this room, we're all aware the political implications, the undermining of democracy, the privacy concerns, the addiction. But we are all also addicted ourselves to our devices, to our apps. Our business and social lives are completely tied up in these products. It's hard to completely disconnect.
Yeah.
So can you give us 2 or 3 specific things that we could all, as citizens, individuals, business people, parents, like what can we do in our own sphere?
So the most important thing you can do is recognize that 2020 in the United States is a big election. And this should be an issue. I go on Fox, I go on MSNBC, Fox Business, CNBC, Conservative Talk Radio, NPR. This is not a partisan issue. This is not right versus left. It's right versus wrong. Get in the grill of every politician you can find and ask them, why is it Google's allowed to scan email? Why are banks and credit card processors allowed to sell your personal data without your permission? Why is it legal for Google to have a terms of service embedded in every TV or smart appliance you buy that gives them the right to spy on you? Why is any of that legal? Why is it legal to even hold data on minors? We can do better. That's the number one most important thing. And in your own life, just remember, Android is spying on you. Apple isn't perfect, but they're better. Those are the 2 things I tell you.
Thank you so much. We are out of time, but this was fascinating.
Thank you all. I just want to say one last word. I want to thank you all because you're very, very brave. Google and Facebook know that you've just spent the last 20 minutes with me, so they're going to follow you for the rest of your life. Thank you all. Good luck. God bless.
Well put this way. Yeah. Thanks.